All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's PatternFly community meeting. We have a number of updates from various groups that work on PatternFly, and once this meeting wraps up, I'll post the recording on YouTube, mail it out along with the agenda and the slides to the PatternFly mailing list. And we have a relatively long agenda today, so I'm not going to belabor anything too long. The first topic is from me, something that we're hoping to start doing open to the whole PatternFly community as early as January is start holding regular PatternFly office hours. What this will do is give us a place to interface with devs, consumers, contributors, kind of virtually, face-to-face, answer questions that people have while implementing PatternFly, address outstanding issues, really to be used for whatever reasons people come up with. So we're excited to see how that pans out. We're hoping to even use it to replace some of our recurring product syncs so that multiple products can be in communication together to see what some sort of priorities each product has, and possibly even get some momentum for ideas that products and suggestions that products are bringing. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. You should see some announcements and invitations in the future. The next thing I wanted to highlight is that it's another quarter. One of our most recent releases, we promoted a handful of components out of beta. And now we have a few new promotion candidates that we are actively evaluating and hoping to get released early next year. So I just wanted to present them to you right now so that if any products have been using them or considering using these components, this would be a great time to give us feedback so that we can make any vital enhancements, breaking changes to them now before they're promoted out of beta. It's a shorter list than we've had kind of recently, which is probably almost relieving. But we have 3 components that are going to be hopefully promoted early next year. One is jump links. That's the first example you see on the bottom left here, helping you navigate through long pages of data faster. We have a back to top component. And we have a calendar month, which is the calendar that's consumed by our date picker. It can be used inline in a page, or it can be used in a popover like a date picker, but it's really just the calendar. So if you are curious about any of those components or have any thoughts or feedback, we would appreciate it greatly. And that's all for promotion candidates. So that's my short spiel to kick off the meeting. And what I'm going to do next is hand it over to Matt and Margot, who have some design guideline updates they want to walk us through.
Thanks, Nicole. Let me just share my screen out quickly. I'm going to talk about the dashboard guidelines, and then I think Margot is going to talk about some updates to the wizard guidelines. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this whole document. You can certainly encourage you to take a look at it on your own time. But I did want to talk a little bit about what's here. So we haven't in PatternFly 4, we never really had anything that specifically addressed the problem of creating dashboards. We have lots of components to help you build dashboards. Dashboards essentially become a collection of cards and charts that are placed on those cards to reflect, graphically reflect information, to give you an overview of system performances. We felt like the best way to really approach this problem was really to provide some comprehensive documentation to help designers in how to think about creating a dashboard, because there's not really just one pattern for a dashboard. There's probably an infinite number of layouts for dashboards. So this document kind of walks you through what some of the standard cards are. And again, you're not limited to these cards, but these are some typical cards that we see in lots of dashboards. And we actually have, if you go to the card demos, you'll find that we've created demos for most, if not all, of these card types. So you can use those and plug them in, or you can create your own variations. And then what the bulk of this is really a step-by-step walkthrough of how to think about identifying and laying out content on the dashboard, how to make your dashboard work. So from listing cards to prioritizing, sizing, and eventually how to lay those out on a responsive grid. Big kudos to Michael Celedonia, who did an initial draft of this, and this is kind of a very much of a brain dump of Michael's process and how he thinks about dashboard layout. And anywhere that's there now. And if you're working on dashboards, I encourage you to take a look, read this through, and let us know if you have any questions.
So I have a couple quick questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I tried to use the current charts that are part of PatternFly, and it's a little hard to get them to lay out correctly and get the font sizes correct. I'm wondering if there's any work that's going to go along with the dashboards to help with that, number one.
Well, one of the things we do have in our backlog is to create an actual live code demo of some of these dashboards, just so you have something that you can work from. So that's something that's still a work in progress. So doing this documentation will hopefully give us kind of a basis for creating those demos. And Marie Dorsko on the design team is doing some work on that now. In terms of using the charts, I don't know, Evan or Nicole, if you guys have any advice on what's the best way to understand how to make the charts work for you.
I can say that there are a few of the React card demos incorporate live charts in them, so that might be a good place to start.
Okay.
But if you're having trouble with any particular chart, absolutely reach out and ask. We have a chart expert in our group, or somebody who knows the charts best, who might be able to help you wrestle with some of the finer points of some of the specific charts.
Yeah, and the demos that Nicole is referring to, these are in the card component React demos, and you'll see there's a number of different card types that kind of align with the documentation I was showing. So yeah, this might be a good thing to look at and see if you can replicate some of these layouts.
Okay, perfect. The other question I had was on the layouts. I know we have like a grid layout that, spans multiple columns, multiple rows. Has there been thought to adding a layout to support a masonry layout? That's where you have multiple columns, but the cards in each column can actually grow vertically, because sometimes we have text in them and not every card has the same amount of text.
Right. We did, Michael Coker and I did recently have some discussion about that. I think right now we kind of have that on hold, but maybe that's something that we would revisit. I don't know, Michael, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's great that you brought that up, because as Matt said, we had just in the last couple of weeks had a conversation about that. Yeah, and as far as how a masonry layout's implemented, I think it can go a number of ways. And so personally, I'd love to see the design that you're going for, and see if there's a way that we could do that currently, or if that's a good opportunity for us to start working on a new layout that could achieve what you're going for, as well as be something that PatternFly offers for other products as well.
Right. Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
So feel free to open up an issue if you want, and maybe attach the designs that you're working on, and then we can kind of take a deeper look at that, see what we might do with that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me stop sharing. Margot, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. So I just had a very quick update, which is that another addition to the design guidelines is how to deal with optional steps in wizards. So if anybody ever wondered how to proceed with that use case, you can find that guidance in the wizards component guidelines. That is pretty much it from me.
All right, awesome. In the agenda, there is a link to some of that information as well. And maybe I'll resend the agenda link for people who came after I already placed it in the chat. There we go. All right, next up is Marie with a design kit update.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm gonna share my screen. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I would like to introduce some updates in our design kit. I've selected just a few of them. First, I want to mention that we've added to our symbol library compact toggle groups and compact labels. That means you can save a lot of space. In case of labels, it would be great if you use, for example, compact table, then you should use compact labels because visually it looks more consistent, but you don't have to, it depends. Then we have a secondary actions drop down that allows you to add more actions for a secondary button. And last from the symbol library is that we've updated padding for tooltips. I guess that we reduced the padding from 16 pixels to 8 pixels here. When it comes to template additions, we've added a compact tree view with guides, as you can see the image on the right side. Yeah, this is it. And the last but not least, we made a huge audit and fixed so many issues in a library and a template file, but you know, this is like never ending. I also contacted Sketch Team and we discussed the resizing issue. However, everything is set up correctly on our side. So if you are experiencing resizing issues on any of our components, please check PatternFly Design Kit channel on a Slack, and I will just try to answer all your questions here. And the last news is that I've been working on our own PatternFly Figma library, and I hope that I will be able to introduce this additional library in the beginning of the next year. Yeah, and that's all for me for now. If you have any questions, just ping me on a Slack. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next update is from Michael Coker and Core.
Thanks. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, there we go. All right, yeah, so up first, in alphabetical order, we have a card update. So we recently introduced new variants for selected state of cards, which are the preferred variants. If you didn't see those from the last update. And so you get this new cool hover feature and new selected feature, which also moves the card up a little bit once it's selected. So that's pretty neat. So we, in this last milestone, we introduced a non-selectable card, which is basically a card that would otherwise be selectable, but isn't for some reason, as that feature is disabled. So it has similar styling to the selectable card, but using disabled colors to indicate that it is not selectable. And up next, we added some cool demos using the context selector component in different contexts in the page. So there are a lot of different use cases for where you might want to put a context selector. And so we created some demos for that. You have one up here in the masthead. So that would be a pretty common use case of it. Lives adjacent to other types of drop downs that might exist up here. This is one with the context selector in the top of the sidebar above the vertical navigation. That's in the collapsed state. We also have this here in the expanded state, just to show what that looks like once that menu is popped open. And then we also have a context selector here. It's a plain text variant, so removes all the box sort of styling and stuff around the toggle, and places it at the top of the main section of the page content. And then up next, we've got a couple of additions to the Dropdown component. First off, we added a secondary toggle. So similar to the primary toggle, which matches our primary button styling, we have a secondary toggle matching the secondary button styling. And then to expand on the primary toggle, we've added support for the primary toggle variation to be used with split button drop-down toggles. So you can see an example of that right there. Up next with the new menu toggle component, as we continue to build out variations of that component to support the different use cases of menu toggles that we have in other components, we've added a plain text variant. So similar to the context selector demo I just showed, this would be a toggle that removes all of the sort of box styling around the toggle and just has the toggle text and the arrow to indicate that it's a toggle. And then this is what it looks like when that toggle is disabled. We added a new variant to the menu component to support the use of the menu component in the vertical navigation. And here's an example of the menu variant. I'm sorry, the nav variant of the menu component used in the flyout navigation. And so this flyout nav is just the menu component, and it's got a vertical nav theme applied with it with the nav variation. And then other updates that we've made to the nav component are, let's see if I didn't, okay, yeah. It looks like I skipped an item. So I'll continue here with the nav variant, or the nav component updates. So we have an expandable third level of the vertical navigation now. So previously expandable navigation only expanded one level. Well, now you not only have subnav, but you have subnav. And so you can see an example of that there. And then we have implemented the menu component inside of the nav to build a drill down variation. And you can see that listed here. And then up next, back to the item that I skipped, we made an addition to the modal component demos to show what seems to be a pretty common use case where you want to place a form inside of a modal, and for whatever reason you don't want to use the built-in action group of the form component to create your submit buttons at the bottom of the form. Instead, you want to put the submit buttons in the footer of the modal, which is going to mean that you're placing the submit buttons outside of the form element that would be placed inside of the modal body. And if you place a submit button inside of a form element, that submit button will automatically submit the form when you click on it. So no magic connecty the .c to JavaScript or whatever you're trying to do to get the button to form submit the form needed for that. When you place the submit button outside of the form, you've got to do something there. You can add a submit handler to the button, that sort of thing. But in this demo, since this is in the core workspace, we only work with HTML and CSS. This shows a way to use the form attribute of a button element to associate a submit button with a form. And so we're just specifying the ID of the form and the body in the form attribute on the button, and that will connect the submit button to the form inside of the body. So that's a pretty useful demo if you run across a need for that kind of thing. Okay, up next, we've got a change. It's not really like a feature, but I figured I would mention it in this meeting for anyone that uses this. So we have an options menu component, and as we've covered a couple of times in this update, we have the plain text variant of our toggles. Previously, this text that was in the toggle was not clickable. Only the arrow was clickable. And so in this last milestone, we've just bundled the text in the toggle with the clickable button that toggles the options menu. So now if you can click anywhere on the arrow or the text, and that will toggle the options menu as it should have been implemented from the beginning. And then up next, some pretty cool stuff with the Popover component, similar to the Modal, which we made this same update recently. We now support in the component an icon that you can associate with the Popover title and different alert states that you can use with the Popover as well that incorporate the icon for the status of whatever the Popover represents. So you've got info, default, success warning, etc., with the different status colors added to the component. So you can see those there. Continuing on a new component that we just built, the text input group. We added an enhancement to support a disabled state for it. So pretty straightforward. We've got that already in our text inputs and other form elements. It looks the same. So anyways, you can see that there. Next, we have some additions to the tile component. Similar to the card selected and hover states that we covered previously. The tile component also supports a selected state, and it has the same treatment on hover and selected. And so here you can see this raised feature that I was talking about in the tile. And then last but not least, the tooltip now supports, similar to the Popover component, it supports diagonal positioning. So you can position the tooltip to the top left, bottom right, etc., of the thing that's triggering the tooltip. And we have different classes that you can apply that position the arrow relative to which diagonal position that you've specified the tooltip to appear. And that's it.
All right, yep, that's it, except for you have our first React update as well, if you're ready for that.
Oh, for once
you
I
remember?
am ready. Yes. And here we go. Okay, yeah, so this is pretty simple, just support for a compact variant of the label component. So you can see the regular label here. Compact basically just changes the font size and changes the padding and spacing, so that the overall space that the label is going to take up is changed. And if I can pull it up real quick, I'll show a use case of this. So here's a good use case. In this horizontal card grid, we've got some labels up here. The label, let's see if I can pull the regular label up. No. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so the regular label takes up quite a bit of vertical space. And when you're placing that label adjacent to just regular body text somewhere, the label can occupy more vertical space than the text that might be beside it, causing too much space above and below the label, as if it were like flowing in text, for example. The labels were flowing in text. That line of text with the labels would be too tall, and so it's going to make the text above and below it look a little bit more spaced out than it needs to be. And so in a layout like this, the presence of the labels, if we were not using the compact variation, would cause this entire row to be a little bit taller than it needs to be. And when you expand this card, we move the labels from that top row into the body of the card. And since a default sized label would impact the height of this row, when we move those labels out of that row, the height adjusts. And so this was a little bug that we found and we're fixing it, that when you would expand this card, that top row would shift in size because it had big labels when it was collapsed, and then didn't have big labels once it was expanded. And that was, so that's a really good use case of if you don't want the labels to shift the content around it, if it's used in line text, use a compact label. So that's it.
Awesome, thank you. The next React update comes from Gabi.
Yep, let me share my screen. Can you see?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so I did a few updates, smaller ones. The first one is for the menu component. I added a plain menu variant, which just removes the shadow box. It's just done by adding a isPlain property to the menu. The next one is scrollable. We already had a scrollable menu option. We just added a scrollable property, and it just makes the menu scrollable. When I remove it, the menu is not scrollable. We set the max menu height to 300 pixels by default, and you can also change it by setting the menu height in this example. The next thing I did was for the select component, we added a placeholder style, which is just done by adding a has placeholder style. We have two options to have a placeholder. You can do it by the placeholder text or by specifying the select option with the isPlaceholder property. So you just do it the same way. You add the has placeholder style to select. And then the last update for me is for the pagination component, and we added an option to not passing the item count. Sometimes you just don't know the total items for the pagination, so we added the option to have this by not passing the item count, and also only just passing the toggle template, and you can use any word there. We went for many. And yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Gabi. Next we have Katie for more React updates.
Alrighty, let me share my screen. Is that sharing? All right.
Yep.
Working on it. All right, so first up is a small update to the progress stepper component. We have a new feature with help popovers support for progress stepper. So each of these progress steps have these little indicators with this dotted dashed line underneath. If you click on it, then it has a popover. To add the popover, just use our popover component. There's 2 new props, popover, where you pass the entire component that you want to be the popover. And you also have to pass this reference ref, so you can actually track how the popover will position itself on the page. So as you can see, the first couple steps have different popovers. These are accessible with keyboard as well. So if you press enter, you can get to the popover content and close it and keep going. I think that covers it for the progress stepper. It's a pretty straightforward update there. Next up, we have several updates to currently just composable table in the form of sticky columns and nested headers. So you can see here, there's, I think, 4 or 5 new demos for all of these different things. There is a table, and you can see this fact column as I scroll horizontally is actually stuck, so it'll stay while the rest of the table scrolls. There's a couple of new properties that you have to apply to every single TH in the header, and then you have to wrap the entire table in a new component to kind of control and facilitate the scrolling. So I think there's a couple of extra modifiers. Each of these examples have some descriptive blurbs to clarify how these are supposed to be set up as well. The sticky column feature also works for multiple columns, with a couple of extra properties you have to set just for getting the spacing between this fact column and this state column correct. But then when you scroll horizontally, both columns remain sticky. You can see that there. We also have support for sticky columns and a sticky header, which sticky header we've already had. But if you apply both of these together, then you'll be able to scroll both directions while remaining sticky for the header and several columns if you desire. Let's see. Next example is for the other feature, which is nested column headers. There, again, another helpful blurb here to kind of guide you through setting up versus just looking and staring at this example text. But this is basically support for having an outer or like top level of header, but then several extra columns underneath it for data organization. Actually, I can better example here. This is supporting it with multiple columns and expandable rows. And actually, I think that's about it. This nested column header covers both examples for the explanation. I think that's it for me.
So I have one question here. On the sticky columns, did you happen to try the interaction of a sticky column with a drop-down action menu? I know I had played with some stuff before, and the action menu and the sticky columns kind of conflicted with each other if it's not set up right.
I don't think I've tested that in these examples. I would imagine the only hiccup I could foresee is like if you were mid-scroll and opened like an action item at the very end or somewhere in that column, the position of the drop-down might be a little confused, but I think only the 2 columns that are sticky actually really influence or change anything about where positions might pop up.
Right. So can you actually do a sticky end column? Is that supported?
With the current implementation, I think it would be possible because these are basically deterministically telling the table where they should be. And I think if you used this left offset property, I think you could tell it to be stuck to the left, but I'm not as familiar with the CSS support in regards to that. Maybe Matt Nolting, would you know off the top of your head if
Yeah,
CSS would work?
We didn't add that for this iteration.
Okay.
But it's entirely possible based on the same logic. So
Maybe like right.
You know, we can add that as a feature request.
Yeah, I would be interested in having the action menu always be sticky, right? Your last column, which is your action.
Right.
But when I played with some of that in a test environment, when you make that column sticky and you open one of those, that open menu conflicts with some of the stickiness of the rows below it. Depends on how it's implemented.
Oh yeah. We did test that, and I think the next step would be to use a popper at that point, because the CSS is so kind of deep and complex at that point. Yeah, we can't satisfy all those with just pure CSS. So I think that the approach would have to be, we explore the popper just to pull that out of the DOM, because we can't, it's just there's only so much you can do with that. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Right. And to reiterate, this currently is only for composable for these new features. I believe we have an issue in our backlog to look at adding sticky columns for legacy table as well. I think that covers
right.
it then. If anybody else have any questions.
All right, thank you. You can also feel free to ask any follow-up questions in the chat if you'd like. We'll move on to Austin with a few more React updates.
Yeah, let me get my screen up. All right. So starting off with the new text input group component, it is a text input that also has a few other things kind of built in. It's composable, but it's designed to contain a utility bar that can have things like this X button for clearing things out, and it can also have chip groups or anything else that you want to try and put in before the text input itself. This is composable, so it just takes a component as a child. An example of what can be made with text input group is this attribute value filtering demo, which allows you to select key value pairs, attribute value pairs that are set in the demo. And you can navigate it via keyboard. When you type, you will filter the list of items that are shown based on the text that you've inputted. And each time you select a full attribute value pair, it gets added as a chip in the chip group. Next up, we've got some revised styling for selectable and selected on card. So now we've got where this new hover style is applied when something's selectable, and on select it raises up. The previous styling for selectable and selected has been moved down here to the bottom of the demos under legacy selectable and selected. And lastly, we have a new panel component that is a container with some extra spice. It has some applicable styling such as raised, bordered, scrollable. You can add headers and footers. You can omit having any of the composable parts and just go with the main text container. It's very, very flexible in what you can do with it. And that is all that I have to share, unless anyone has any questions.
So on the text group, we have a great use case for that where you could select and get key value pairs. I noticed that it did a +1 right there. I know there's another library out there I've used before that while you are inputting, it kept all the items there and would make like an expanded section. But once your focus went away, then it collapsed down to just the chips with the +1. And I didn't know if there was some thought around something like that. That way you could see everything that's currently selected while editing.
Question. I know that, I mean, this is scrollable in the chip group. This is just a regular chip group that's in here. So it's got all the same functionality that chip group has.
Okay.
I wonder if with expanded, how that works. Yeah, it's still defaulting to left aligning there. So I don't know, that is a neat idea.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, awesome. All right, a few more React updates. We have some first from Tatani.
Okay, good morning. I just have a couple small updates to share. The first one is for the tab component. We added the ability to add padding around the tab body content. So all you have to do is add the prop has padding to tab content body, and then it will appear like so with padding around the body, as opposed to like in this example below where there's no padding. Okay. And then the dual selector, Joe made an update to have a disabled state for the dual selector. So this is the regular dual selector that's not disabled. And then if you just add it's disabled prop, then now it will appear disabled styling and you cannot interact with the component. And then another update I wanted to mention, but we don't currently have a demo for this, that will be coming, is for the toolbar. We've added a prop to a sticky, so you can make the toolbar stick to the top in this container. So that's a useful feature to have for the toolbar. I would imagine you could use that in maybe in the table to make the toolbar sticky to the top. So we don't have a current demo for that, but that should be coming. That's all I have to share for updates. Oh, and Dana contributed that update for us.
The toolbar sticky, if you had a table and a toolbar and you had sticky headers, would those conflict with each other or would it work?
I haven't tried that out. I don't know with not melting, if you might have any idea off the top of your head if those would conflict.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to try it out and see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there is an issue open right now to build a demo for the sticky toolbar, which in a context would make sense to put on top of a table. So it'll be a great opportunity to test that for sure. I imagine it won't conflict, but we'll have to test it.
I'm not sure that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Right.
Sticky on sticky is like,
Stickies.
I guess that seems like the next logical step. So we'll figure it out one way or the other, I guess. But,
All right. Yep, we will not stop until we have implemented basically Microsoft Excel in React table components. Okay. And the last React updates are coming from Evan.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and steal the screen share from Tatani here. All right, so I've got the last two React updates, and then I'll move on to our org website updates as well. So the first one here is a follow-up to an issue that John Coops logged, so thanks for that. So it has to do with, sorry, let me pull this back here. All right, there we go. With the way that jump links were working. So just a quick summary, jump links basically implement a scroll spy to watch as you scroll down the page and highlight the section that's right at the top of the page, or you can pass an offset. So in this case, I think we have an offset of 76 pixels. So rather than when the heading hits the top of the screen, it's actually when it hides behind the masthead here. So you can see when we get to heading 2, it jumps down, which works great. When you scroll to the bottom and you can't actually go any further, you'll notice heading 4 and heading 5 don't hit the top of the page there or hit that offset. So scrolling, they don't get highlighted. The confusion was coming in if you clicked on heading 4 or heading 5, let's say you clicked heading 5, it would scroll you just to what you see here, but it wouldn't highlight heading 5. It actually would take a look at the page once the scrolling stops, see what the topmost section is there, which is heading 3, and would highlight that. So although the view doesn't change at all, we've corrected that. So if you click on heading 5, let's say, it'll actually go ahead and just highlight the one you clicked on to kind of confirm, you clicked heading 5, we don't want to highlight heading 3 and cause confusion there. You can always change the offset. So, you can move how high or low it'll actually register where you've scrolled to, but this will just correct for the actual heading that you click on. Just a quick call out, if I click on heading 5, it'll highlight it, but since heading 3 is still at the top here, or I guess section 3, as soon as I start scrolling, it'll snap back to the one that's currently in view at the top of the page. Yeah, but that just fixed that click behavior. The last update we have for React is adding support for context selector items as links. So by default, context selector items are being displayed as buttons. So if we look here, let's see, I think I've got my inspector opened up here. By default, you'll get this button, class PFC context selector menu list item. You can actually pass through an href prop now, and that will automatically render an A tag or an anchor tag with that href passed through rather than the button. So that's how you kind of use that link. And then hand in hand with that, with the disabled items that you see here, we previously, with the button, just had to add a disabled attribute because we now have the option of a link. If you are passing in that href, so it's displaying a link behind the scenes, we also just update the disabled properties here as well. So we've got the ARIA disabled attribute and the tab index on there, and we've removed disabled, which isn't an attribute on the anchor link. So that's how you can actually go ahead and use anchor tags instead of buttons in these cases. And if there aren't any questions, I think that wraps up our React issues, and I can move on just 2 quick website updates that we've got here. So we've done some work on the icons workflow that we have. So icons essentially are created by design, defined by our core team, and then passed through React, where we create React icons. And then on the website, we kind of grab pieces of all of those in order to display the icons info for you. One issue that we had previously with that workflow is if we ever added a new icon, well, first of all, we didn't display any sort of Unicodes. And if we did add a new icon, it would insert it alphabetically, and then all the Unicodes after that icon would get bumped up by 1. So there wasn't a consistency, and we weren't displaying those. We did want to go ahead and add Unicodes to the site, and so in order to do that, we went back to the start and kind of fixed that inconsistency. So now all the icons that we have set Unicodes. Any new ones that we add will just essentially be added to the end of the list with the next new available Unicode. So long story short, if you go to the icons page on our site, you can see now we've got the columns that we had here before, and at the end, there's also a Unicode column. You can click on that to copy the Unicode, and we've got the font awesome Unicodes that start with F, and our own PatternFly icons were already prepended, if I can find any. Here we go, with E, so they start with E. So those Unicodes are listed now, are available, and this should persist for any changes that we make to icons. If we add any, or if any are deprecated, whatever those changes may be, it should all work as expected. The last update that we have is just around our beta components. So I think Nicole kicked off the meeting, or at least towards the start, chatted through beta components. We did have a request, and we took a look. There wasn't really information about the beta components on the site, so we wanted to kind of flesh that out a little bit. So we do have this kind of alert at the top of each beta component, just saying, this is a beta component. Right at the end, we've added a link to some documentation that we created, and we go ahead and click on here. It'll take you to our PatternFly org repo and where we kind of keep track of the beta components. So you can see the last couple, and it looks like our next upcoming plans, beta component promotions. So Nicole actually updates these each time we're releasing new beta components with some information and screenshots of each. We've got a README here, just kind of giving an overview of beta components, how they work for us, and also a full list of everything that's currently in beta, because as you navigate around the site, you'll see those alerts, but this is a place you can kind of see it all. And we also have columns that just show when each component was released in both the PatternFly repo and the PatternFly React repo as well. So you can kind of see when they went live. As far as actually being promoted from beta, we do want to make sure that components have a good, usually at least a few months for different teams to implement them and for us to get feedback. If we do have a number of issues against a component, we don't want to move it out of beta. We want to make sure that we get it in a good place. So there are several different factors. So there's not a set kind of time of, it was released on this date, so it'll be out of beta at this point. But each quarter we are taking a look and trying to figure out which ones kind of fit into that definition and can be promoted. So you'll see that link at the end of all of the beta component alerts on each page. Any questions? All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Nicole. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, the last item on the agenda today is an update on what we are working on from Matt.
Yeah, as usual, I'm going to wrap things up just by giving a preview of some of the things that we're working on for our upcoming release or two. Again, set my screen. Let's see here. Okay. So I should say that we have one more release for this 2021 calendar year, which will should come by the end of next week, and then we're taking a little bit of break before the holiday shutdown, and we'll resume our normal sprint calendar starting in the first week of the new year. So we should have our first release of 2022 coming somewhere near or before the end of January. So some of the things we're currently working on with the design team.
If you're sharing your, you're not seeing your screen, I don't think, if you're trying to share it.
Okay. Oh, okay, I forgot to click. I don't allow. All right, is that good now?
Yes,
right.
Thank you.
The design team has been working kind of in the background on some ideation for a visual refresh, next generation PatternFly look and feel. We currently don't have a specific target as to when we might roll that out, but we wanted to kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit and start thinking about how we might update, improve our general look and feel of PatternFly. So certainly, if you have any input or feedback on what we currently like or don't like about the PatternFly visuals, now would be a good time to feed that back to us, so we can consider that in our redesign mode. Also been working on trying to refine and revisit filter patterns and provide more options there for designers to work with in creating different kinds of filter scenarios, looking at enhancing our support for editable label groups, a Boolean query builder, graphical query builder component, and also looking at adding row striping for tables, which was requested from a couple of folks for just improving the readability across rows. On the development side, some of the things we're currently working on, I think Michael mentioned in his presentation the non-actionable and raised cards. We're still putting finishing touches on those on the React side. Those should be available in our next release. We have kind of ongoing work with creating composable drop-down components and releasing those little by little as new demos within the menu component. Adding additional navigation options. The flyout is now available, as I think the tertiary expansion is also. So Drilldown is the last of these that we are still work in progress. We'll we're starting to work on some enhancements to file upload to support multiple file uploads in one concurrently. And adding a new truncate component that'll support middle truncation of text strings. Finally, we've been working on integrating the latest version of the Red Hat font, which has some interesting new features for, introduces a new mono font, a tabular font also, which is kind of nice for looking at numbers in fixed width columns. Much more scannable than the proportionally spaced font, and then has some variable font features. We are currently looking at introducing this initially as an opt-in, and I actually was asked if Michael Coker could just say a couple words about this in terms of how that actually is going to manifest itself.
Yeah, do you mind if I
grab the screen share?
Screen
No,
share?
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, as Matt mentioned, there's a lot of really cool stuff in the font now that we didn't have previously. Tabular font variant numeric, which will tell the font to use the monospaced version of numbers and otherwise leave the font alone. That's really cool. Has a lot of really cool implications for layout and organization of data on the page. There's also variable font support now, which is really cool. So if you use lots of different weights of the fonts and want finer control over the presentation without really, with a sizable file size improvement using the variable font versus importing multiple variations of the existing font for different font weights, that's a really cool update. And then there are just updates to the presentation of the font using the existing basic supported formats. Anyways, here's the Red Hat official / Red Hat font. That's the repo for this, for the Red Hat font. If anyone doesn't know about that, you can go there. You can download the actual font source files, install them, that kind of thing. You can read about the different releases. You can see demos of like what everything looks like, and then you go into web fonts, and that's where the cool stuff is that we use in PatternFly. And then I'll show that I have a PR up here in the core repo. So PatternFly / PatternFly. PR number is 4476. It's currently open for reviews. If anyone wants to check it out, give feedback, that sort of thing, I would love to see that. And so to touch on how we would introduce this, because the update to the font does introduce two small gotchas. It's pretty much seamless. There's just a little bit of a different way that the updated font handles the spacing around a couple of the characters. It shifts it just a tad, makes it look a lot better, but it could have some small impact on page layout, and we don't necessarily want to cause an issue. So that's one reason that we want to make this an opt-in. Another reason is that the most recent updates drop the WAF format, so we're only supporting WAF2 in this new font, which should be fine as far as PatternFly users are concerned. As far as I'm aware, it's only Internet Explorer that uses WAF, but on the off chance that someone was using that version, you probably wouldn't want to opt into the new font without at least setting up fallbacks for the other WAF font or other fonts that you might be using for whatever reason. And so this PR introduces the updates as an opt-in. To opt in to the changes, you just add this class to the body tag of your page, PFM Red Hat updated font. That updates the base font just to use the new WAF2 format, which will introduce the tabular numbers. There's also an introduction of the Red Hat monospaced font, which we didn't have previously. So now this font supports a monospaced variation. We use a custom monospace stack in PatternFly currently. And so going forward, we would like to update to the Red Hat mono font. So this opts in to the Red Hat mono font, which would be really cool to test out, see if that works. And then if you wanted to use the variable font variations, it's PFM Red Hat VF font. And so we've got a little test build URL here in this PR. Feel free to pop that open, plug in these classes, see how that works, leave your feedback. And that's the plan for now.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so as Michael said, we're kind of treading a little bit gently on this because we have done internal testing on this and everything looks good, but we wanted to be careful not to, as you know, fonts can have effects on spacing of things, and we want to be careful not to cause any unexpected effects. But we do encourage people, this should be available as an opt-in in our next release. We do encourage people to try this out and give us any feedback, and hopefully down the road somewhere we will be able to flip the switch and make this our default. So I guess that's it. And back to you, Nicole, to close things out.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks everyone. Like I mentioned, I will send out an email to the PatternFly mailing list which will include a YouTube recording of this meeting, plus the slides with all the links and the agenda. So stay tuned for that. If you would like to present anything at their next community meeting, which will probably be at the end of January, please reach out to me. We love to have people from outside of the dedicated PatternFly team present anything they're working on related to PatternFly to get feedback and exposure and whatever. So let me know. And that's it. Thanks everyone for joining and for your hard work, and we'll see you in a couple months.
Thank you.